Oh, give me a second, guys. Sorry. Still new to this stuff. Hello. This is live as you see it, people. Welcome to another live. We are here today to do a Q&A on the Lyran Legacy, which is a lovely book. But first, I'm actually going to talk to you guys a little bit about what's coming up. And then we will get going. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about the book, please post them in the chat and I'll be sure to star them so that Jennifer can answer your questions. Hi, Living in Radiance. Hello, Mom. And hello, Amanda. Thank you for being here. So while we wait for everybody to filter in, I'm just going to go over what the next couple of shows are. So coming up next, we have a deck deep dive. Say that 5 times fast. So we're going to actually go through all of my decks. So Oracle, Tarot, Lenormand. I'm going to show you guys all the decks that I have, all the decks that I inherited. And I'm going to go through them all and kind of say, like, this is what I like about it. This is what I don't like about it. You know, purchase responsibly. And then the next show after that is going to be coloring the True Sight Oracle. So I don't know if you guys remember back, we did another show where I was working on coloring It's a Black and White deck. So this is part 2. And then after that, the next show after that is a Cooking with the Kitchen Witch episode. So I know you guys love those so much. And we're going to be cooking a, well, they call it fudge. It's not really fudge. It's more like a cheesecake bar. But anyway, fudge. It's a really easy recipe, literally 3 ingredients. As healthy a dessert as you can get because there's no added sugar. So yeah, we're going to have fun making that, try a couple different flavor combinations. So I'm excited and hope you guys can come hang out with me. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Jen on screen, but I'm going to do a little intro first. And I'm also going to show you a picture that I had a little bit of fun with. So this is my hard copy book that I have. But I was at my parents' and my mom has this, has a cover on the window that makes rainbows. And this rainbow was just like perfectly across the wall. And I'm like, okay, I need to have a little photo shoot with Jen's book. So that's what this photo is from.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely perfect. Like the way it lined up and everything. All right. So this is a Q&A for Starlit Paths, the Lyran Legacy. And it was released on Amazon on August 8th. So Lionsgate. It was number 1 and number 2 in hot new releases for the paperback. It was number 1 in 4 categories for the Kindle version. Number 1 in 2 categories as well for the paperback. And then number 2 in another category on top of that. Mm-hmm. So amazing, guys. We have the author right here for you to ask your questions to. So without further ado, welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Kaylee. This is super exciting. And yeah, I mean, thank you to everybody who went ahead and grabbed a copy of the book. It's because of all of you that it was able to hit those numbers.
Right.
And it's pretty incredible. I think in one of them, it's actually still sitting in number 3, which is like wild to have that still be the case. This far in, because normally, after the big kind of rush, then everything switches and changes. But no, right. It's still, doing well. So that's super exciting.
Okay, so we don't have anybody posting questions in the chat yet. So I do have a couple of questions for you.
Absolutely. So I guess say thank you though to your mom, Living in Radiance, for the congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations. I've been nagging her to start reading it. She's finishing up a library book first that had to be due back, but I think you're next on the list.
Okay. Well, and that's the other thing. I know, we said question and answer and all of that. And we on Twilio Talk earlier today also invited anybody, like if you've had an experience with it, and even if you don't catch the live, later to put questions in, and Kaylee can let me know, hey, Jen, there's this question that came in. I can come over and put some answers in the chat. But what I also would absolutely love is to hear from you guys, to hear the impact that it had, or what it came up for you, or I've been blessed to have people actually be doing that and sharing what's coming up. But I'd love to hear more if you have more to share.
Well, and actually that is a perfect lead into one of the questions I had. So where is it here? Let me find it on my list, because I'm going to check these off as I go so I don't ask the same question twice. You've mentioned that some of the characters link to people in like this lifetime. Can you speak on that, and to like whoever you feel comfortable speaking about? I know some people have been more public about it than others, but
yeah, and I'll only speak to those that are really open to it and comfortable. So I think the main one that everybody is familiar with would be Teriel Estrielis, who is my childhood friend and my lifelong friend in this book. And Teriel is Tanis.
Right.
So everybody, my whole body is just tingling right now. So anybody who, has watched us on Twillo Talk, is going to be, familiar with our energy and how we operate together. And, like, this and
yes.
But like we very much have that very old dynamic. And not like old married couple dynamic, but kind of in some ways. It's that piece of just like our souls have known each other for so long. And so, and I know Tanis and I have shared about this on Twillo Talk and in, other places about, how we kind of got together in this lifetime. And it was like the moment we met, we were like, oh, I know you. We're supposed to be like doing stuff together. But then like life happened and we kind of separated again, and we kept doing that on and off for a period of time before it just kind of went boom, you're together. And what was fascinating is like the first couple times we had met, we didn't realize, all of the kind of, oh, we've had all these lives together and all of that. It was just this kind of connection piece. But then also what was really fascinating is like we knew that we were meant to do work together, and we were meant to like, be on this spiritual journey together in this lifetime. So much so that, we've shared often about this moment of IKEA. We had IKEA dates. It is what it is.
They have amazing food. I go there all the time for dinner, so I get it.
Well, and my kids were really little, and like they had a ball pit and all that kind of stuff at the time. They probably still do. I don't know, but yeah. So we did that, and in the midst of just sitting and chatting, all of a sudden we're doing some of this like warrior peacekeeper work, working with like spirits and stuff like that, and then right back into conversation as if it was like second nature. Like, yeah, we just did this thing that anybody else would be like, what on earth just happened? And we're both like, yeah, okay, now, so what? Right. And I think that like those kinds of experiences, even though we didn't consciously have context for them for a while, it was very evident. And so when this lifetime came through, it was like, oh yeah, that just makes sense.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, from my point of view of it, so I read the book. I read the book a couple of times. So for those that didn't know, I guess I can say now that the book's released, but I did help in some of the editing process. And so reading it, I was like, okay, I'd heard you talking about the book and like, from both you and Tanis, and I'm like, okay, like where am I going to slot in all this? And what's been really interesting is actually having memories come up, but be after what happens in the book. So that's been really interesting, but that much like you said, like the dynamic's the same for me, and those memories, the dynamic is the same now in this lifetime as it was then, where I have like you and Tanis as teachers, as mentors. So it's been so interesting to be like,
well, and I love the in real life kind of like, because again, this is real, but it in a very different way than how we experience now. But to see those parallels as you're talking about, right? This, and I think that's a lovely piece too, because I know that there have been other people who've read and they're like, I really wanted to find myself in the book, or I really wanted to be able to identify with somebody. And some people have, and other people haven't. And yet there's other things that still trigger the memories and bring back the awareness of, oh, I might not have been in this particular kind of thing, but I do remember this, and I was a part of that. Or in the glossary where we talk about the different, and even in the book where I talk about roles and things that people had and the significance of them. And so I think that there's something in there for anybody who has had a galactic history to be able to connect with on some level.
Yeah. So here's a funny question for you, because it came up at one point when I was talking to a friend about the book. They asked him, they're like, oh, is it fiction or nonfiction? And I said, well, it depends on your belief in past lives or not.
Great question. Yes and yes.
Yeah, both?
No and no. Well, and that's it. Okay, I'm going to, so one person left a review.
Yes, yeah, I saw it.
It was like, well, this didn't resonate with my memory of the book, of that time period. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't make it any less powerful, right? Because we all have different memories. So for those people where it's like, okay, I don't really understand past lives, or this doesn't feel like it was the same as my experience with it, it's going to be more of a fiction book. Right? Just because that's how you're going to need to read it if it doesn't resonate in that same way. But for those that it resonates with, myself included, I remember this life. I remember these experiences. So in a lot of ways, it is a memoir, and it is very much a nonfiction, because it's about things that happened in our galactic history. And so, take it for what it is. It's one person's memory.
Right.
But I say that with the caveat of one person's memory that activated many other people's memories that all resonate with it. So maybe we all resonate because we were in the same timeline together. And somebody who it doesn't resonate with was in a different timeline. And that's all fine. Right? It doesn't... It is a truth. It is my truth, but it is a truth. Yeah. And so that's why I say both.
I like to quote Doctor Who in times like this, where I say, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
And actually, when you were talking there, the other thing, of course, my brain always speaks in metaphors, but I was just thinking, I'm like, it'd be like two different people going to a concert. One's sitting up, one has floor seats, and one's sitting up in the 400 level. They're both at the same concert, but their experience and their point of view is going to be completely different.
Absolutely.
So, it's a really interesting thought to have. And actually, that leads into a couple of questions, or the conversations that we just had. So one of them was, so there are many events you mentioned that seem to have parallels to what is happening right now. So is that why you felt it was important to release the book, like at this time? Like, what made you want to get it out, on Lionsgate? Like, in the year 2025.
They told me to.
That's a valid answer.
But that being said, I mean, the first memory of it probably came through in 2021.
Okay.
And I started tracking the memories, the dreams, the meditations, all of the things that came up at that point in time. So it's been a work in progress for quite a long time. What happened, though, is I got to a point where I was like, okay, like, I'm not getting a ton of memories anymore. I feel like it's pretty good. I'm going to start talking about it. This was last year.
Right.
Silly me. Because at that point, I had gotten a good chunk of the galactic history, and I had had the basic framework of this lifetime. And so I just put all of that in there and thought, okay, cool. This is what it's going to be.
No.
Right. I think that finally opening up and sharing about it
Yes. Yeah.
was my gateway into the flooding.
Yeah. They're like, oh, she's ready now. Okay, everybody
As people
gets
call it.
yeah.
Because the moment, like, and admittedly, I mean, I'm a registered psychotherapist. I am, CRPO is my regulatory body. I have to be very mindful of how I put myself out there.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I do say I am, the light worker psychotherapist. I make it very clear that I work from a spiritual foundation. That being said, like, I do have to make sure that I'm not too woo.
Right. Yeah.
And so I really spent a lot of time in prayer and meditation and kind of going, like, are you sure this is what I'm meant to be doing? Are you sure I actually even thought about like using a pen name and stuff. Cause I was like, is this really like, am I meant to put this out there as me? And all I kept getting is you need to talk about it. You're going to need to share about it. You're going to need to step into this energy at some point and bring this energy forward of who you were then. So there's no hiding that.
Right.
Right. And so I sat with that for a while and I went, okay, I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm not sure I'm ready. Right. So we're looking at like good 3 years of, I don't know if I'm ready. And then, and then at the, I guess, I don't even remember, mid last year. I think it was about a year from the moment that I said, hey, this is coming through to when it actually was released.
Right.
And in that final year, so much more came in. I mean, and you know this to the point of like
even like 2
going
days
through
before
an edit. And then I'm like, oh, here's a whole new chapter. Can you read this one too and tell me if it makes sense?
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a beautiful blessing too, because having, I had other people go through it. I had Tanis read through it. I had Dr. Lisa Thompson, who is Uluru, and they read through it. But because they have such vivid memories of it, like they were able to say, oh, you know, this, or maybe add to that, or, did you really mean this when you said this? Or, like those kinds of things, which allowed me to kind of, step back and go, oh, okay, I should probably add more information about this or that. But it was, having a couple other, like you and Don even, who was like, he'd edit a section and come back to me and go, I don't even understand what you're talking about here. And I go, oh, I should probably explain this better. Right. Yeah. And so I would explain it better. And then you would go, oh yeah, this explanation makes sense. Or maybe you need to change like just the way that you said this. And like, so it was really, really helpful to have these different insights coming in. And it helped expand the book to what it is now, because, my, writing out the memories of it is one thing, but to actually, start to go through and explain more in detail, it opened me in so many ways, because even though to one degree, I realized I had access to this information, I wasn't bringing it forward.
Right.
And, when you sent me the list of words that weren't in the glossary,
I gave you a heart attack.
I just have to share, like, okay, Kaylee was incredible, like, in the work that she did to help me with this. But what was like mind-boggling was this Excel spreadsheet or Word document with like this,
table. It was a table.
It was a table.
It was
It was very well done. Of like, I don't know, what was it, 40 or 50 words?
Yep.
Or concepts that were in the book that I had not yet included in the glossary at the back. and looking at it and going, oh, okay, I should include. And it was so funny because I was like, okay, there's a couple here I'll include. And then I ended up including almost
I think you
all of
added them. I think you added all of them actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because as I was going through, I was like, yeah, it makes sense to add a little bit more detail about this. And yes, it would be helpful to add a little bit more detail about that. And of course, the entire time they're going, write this down. And I'm like, oh.
I was joking with you about like you picked the wrong person to edit your book because you and I are both 1-3s. I'm like, I want as much information. Like, give me a doorstop. Like, I'll take a book that's 800 pages if you gave me that information.
Well, and it could have been.
Yeah.
One of the one of the feedbacks that I had received early on, I had somebody do an edit for me. And she had said, maybe you want to split this into a couple different books, because I had the entire compendium in there as well. And that would have just been a ridiculously large book. And yes, I understand, like, go for it. I like having all the information. At the same time, like, I wanted to make it affordable, right? Because Amazon, they're like, you can only, like, this is the lowest you can make it and all that kind of stuff. So I I wanted to make sure that that was the case, and it made sense to start to split it up, which is why we ended up technically with 3 different products basically that go with this. Right. So the Starseed guide, which I also had at the back of it, just because I had all my notes there. But it made a lot more sense to be able to put it in an actual birth chart that was customizable to each person, as opposed to just having like you got your birth chart. So, like the first half of it is like customizable to you and your birth information. But then the second half, which is like 140 pages,
it's nuts, guys.
Like a generic guide. That was like a whole other book that would have been in here. And so now we're 1 second. Can you just shut my door, please? Sorry, it's just getting loud out there. And so we, after kind of talking about everything and all, it just made sense to start to break it down. And I'm glad that I did, because it allows for more. Right. Whereas if I'd had to do the compendium and all with this, like, there's just no way I would have gotten it out. So, and to your question, sorry, I know I'm just going on here.
No, it's good.
But to your question, like, they were very adamant that it needed to come out on the 8th. And even after talking with like a person who helps with publishing books and does the marketing and stuff, and being told like, this is a ridiculous like thing to be like, okay, I want to have it out at this time. But what was really, really interesting is they were so clear, like, you have to do this for the 8th. And so I did everything to get it out for the 8th, and it came out on the 9th. And I was like, why? Why were you so and I think that it was so beautiful the way that it worked, though, because we were still in the Lionsgate energy, just coming off the cusp of it, but like still very much in it. And we were fully in the full moon energy. That's right. And so like there were these 2 amazingly powerful energies. And so just by putting it that tiny bit later, it really was like a and I could feel it, and I could feel the energy around it. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. I'm just going to listen to you guys.
Well, I mean, if people follow you on your channel, you actually made a couple of posts kind of about stepping back and just letting it happen. And I loved that. In that moment, you could have been like stressing out of your mind, pulling your hair out, and you're like, nope, I'm using this as a learning opportunity, everybody. You can learn along with me.
Yeah. Well, and it was so neat because I remember kind of going like, I don't understand what's happening. Right. Like, it was ready. Everything was good to go. I contacted KDP and they were like, I don't know, because, they're really helpful. And I was like, all right, I'm going to just hand this over and it's going to be what it's going to be. And what was really interesting is what came, and I know I shared it on on social media was we have all of this transformative energy and this energy of abundance and being able to manifest with the Lion's Gate.
Right.
But then we have the moon energy, which is telling us to release and to, bring all these things together. And so what was really cool and what came was our ability to, sorry, Yoshi.
That's okay. I'm trying to multitask and not doing it well.
But to, that balance, being able to balance the energy. So we have this like push forward, but also slow down. Right. We don't have to rush head first into it. And so I just thought it was a really beautiful message that was coming through for me at the time and just wanted to share that.
Mm-hmm. So what I was trying to do in the background all subtly and was not subtle at all whatsoever. So if you guys kind of were paying attention to what Jen was just saying, it means that there's 3 different things related to the books. There's the book, there's the compendium that's going to be coming out, and then there's the Starseed Guide. So I thought I would take the 2 seconds just to show you guys. And what I'll do is I'll link if I haven't already, I'll link the website in the comments after the live, so you guys can go and check that out. But this is the Astrological Starseed Frequency Report, or your Starseed Guide. It's amazing. I've read my copy. I think the first thing I told you was this document called me out, and but in the best way possible. So what you can do is you can go to the website. You're going to scroll down. So actually the website it'll take you to is the main, so it's starlitpaths.ca, and then you can do /Starseed Guide. Or there is a link if you just put starlitpaths.ca in, there is a button you can press that'll take you to the guide page. So this is it here. So all you have to do is put your name, your place of birth, date, all of that, and your email address. And then you can, I guess, basically just download the chart, right?
So what'll happen is when you put your information in, you're going to get the human design guide. Okay. And then you'll have an option. So why don't you go ahead and just put in like, Jane Doe, whatever kind of thing. And then you guys can see. So maybe born, be born right now. Let's see.
So August 25th, 2025. And it's currently 8:20. We'll put 8:30. And PM. And then email address. I'll just put in my email address there. View your chart. Okay. There we go.
So it'll bring up a human design chart. But you'll see that top box. So go ahead and scroll back up there, Kaylee. Yeah. That top box there where it says Starseed Astrology Report.
Yes.
So that's where you can go ahead and get
that chart. Awesome.
And
so that's nice. So you get the kind of all-in-one. So you get the human design as well as your astrology report. So that's kind of nice that you kind of get that 2-in-1 kind of deal. So that's awesome. So yeah, guys, go check that out. Actually, what I'm going to do here is put the link in for you. Copy paste. All right. So that's linked to the website. So that's for the book specifically, but there is the link to that guide on that page, as well as if you scroll down, there's actually a Spotify playlist that I created for the book as well. Because while I was doing all the edits, I was listening to music and was like, oh, I'm reading this specific scene and it's playing in my head like a movie. And this sounds like it should be on the soundtrack. So
yeah, that was awesome. Getting the soundtrack and then listening to it and talking about what scenes actually come to mind at different, points in the music. And so that was super cool. So that's actually on the website as well.
Yeah. So you were kind of speaking about the process of the book coming to fruition. So like, what was it like to self-publish? Like, if you want to just talk very briefly about that.
It's a learning curve. I will give you that. So I've self-published a couple things in the past, but I hadn't done a whole lot with the ebook. And so what actually ended up happening is I was told to publish the Spheres book first, the Spheres of Consciousness. And I'm glad I did, because the first EPUB version of the Spheres of Consciousness was a mess. Like Kindle, like KDP has this program that you can use, and it looked like it was fine on there. But people were telling me like it was coming in too small, or it wasn't showing up at all. They were really struggling. Like it was just a disaster. And so I ended up finding out about other programs and things to use that helped a lot. And so I was able to iron out a lot of those issues with that book, which I understand now is why they told me, like, take a break for a minute, get this one finished, and then come back to it, because I needed to have that learning curve, and they knew it. They knew, like, Jen, you're not going to get this right the first time. So let's just get you to have a few hiccups over here.
Practice makes perfect, right?
Yeah. Well, it was really good, because then when I was, ready to do the Lyran Legacy, I already had the software. I already had everything that I needed in order to make it go what I thought was smoothly.
So I actually have a question specifically about the book, or a part of what's in the books. So we'll do some of those questions, I think. So for the quotes at the beginning of each chapter, were those channeled for you, or were they more memories of people actually like speaking to you with those quotes? Like
a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of them were memory, especially the ones of people in the book.
Okay.
Those ones, like I can remember scenes where they said the different things, whereas some of them were channeled. Like I don't have a specific memory of when or why it was said, or how, where it came from.
Yeah.
So yeah, and some of them came through, and I know I don't even have a memory of who that is.
Right. So it might have been a book that you read in that lifetime or something even. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Because I'm not, I don't have an awareness of it. One of the quotes was actually with the Orion group, which I didn't have conscious direct contact with. Right. And so it came through as a channeled, put this in, as opposed to an actual memory. So a little bit of both.
Yeah.
In there.
Interesting. Yeah. Because when I was reading them, I'm like, I wonder, like, how did they come in for you? That's exciting. So there are a number of themes that run throughout the book, especially the idea of found family. Do you find that important to you even now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So talking about parallels, right?
Yeah.
With now and then, it's really interesting, because in that, and Dr. Lisa Thompson actually on A Galactic Gap pointed this out, but in that lifetime, she lived in a remote constellation, hidden away. And in this lifetime, she lives in Hawaii on a remote island. Right. And in that lifetime, I had to leave my home, and I went to live with Tanis on her planet. And in this lifetime, I have immigrated. I now live in a different country than I was born in, and I live in the one with Tanis. So it's really cool to see the similarities in this lifetime that I hadn't even consciously realized. I had other people go, "Hey, did you notice this?" And I went, "Oh, I didn't know."
Again, those, as you said, those like parallels, or those themes, or those kind of dynamics between people that just seem to be repeating themselves.
Absolutely.
Or mirroring even.
Like found family, that piece of it. I talk about the diaspora. I talk about the great scattering. I talk about how as Lyrans and other beings, because other planets were also targeted. It wasn't just the planets in the Lyra constellation. And what ended up happening is we really had to connect with all of these other cultures that were already established. And so we, you know, earlier on you had asked about why it has to come out now, like that
Right.
piece. And I think that there are a multitude of parallels in the life that we're living right now and what happened in that one.
Right.
Obviously, we're not in a position where, all like the huge planets are being destroyed, and yet we are destroying ours, right?
Right.
So there is maybe on a smaller
Yeah.
scale, but there is a lot of parallel. There's a lot of parallel in politic dynamics and things that are happening, and we're not going to get into
No.
all of that because that's not what the show is about. But there are things that we can take from how we handled things in the
Right.
book and then move that energy into today
Mm-hmm.
in order to help us learn how to navigate, how to accept
Right.
each other, how to hold space for one another. And so this idea of found family is really important. I mean, I do have my family, but we're scattered all over the place.
Right.
And I don't have access to them on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis. And so, even in this lifetime, found family is my family,
Right.
right? And so we do live these parallels. And I think that, as we look at kind of shifting some of the dynamics around the beliefs that we hold right now, we begin to open to the possibility that there's more than kind of what we've been conditioned
Right.
to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, yeah, all of that to say yes.
So this leads to another question then. Any surprises while writing the book? Like, did you have
Oh,
any?
God. Yeah. um, Surprises. So, I think the very first thing that was very surprising for me
Mm-hmm.
was the fact that I could remember
Right.
a lifetime like this.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about spiritual journeying and accessing the Akashic and all of that
Right.
kind of stuff. And you know, I knew that this was all possible, but it wasn't something that I had been doing on a regular basis when this first started to come
Right.
through. That's developed over time. And, to be able to understand the healing that had to come through, I think was another really big
Right.
piece for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think we mentioned this probably on Twiller Talk or one of them. Tannis kept pulling me these cards about your family's okay. They're
Right.
protected.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I know. I don't know why you keep giving. I
Yeah.
know my
They're right
family's fine.
here.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I know. And then one day she pulled it again, and it just
Yeah.
washed over me. You don't mean my family here.
Mm,
Oh. And my whole body right now is vibrating
right.
again, right? Because it was in that moment that I went, "Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
I have to process this grief. This isn't like, oh, it's just coming
Mm-hmm.
through. I'm feeling it."
Right.
And I just in that moment broke down and let myself just feel the
Yeah.
feels. And I think at that point, I finally felt ready to start writing
Right.
about those particular, like, I think my initial, note about my planet was like, planet destroyed, went to go live with Teriel. Like that
Yeah.
was like that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm like,
Because
I'm
you had
not
to work
touching
through all
that.
of that. Yeah.
Right. So to actually write those scenes and having to live those moments again, it was really well, this, not everybody knows
No.
this. I think I had grief or sadness
Actually, yeah, I was gonna link to one
or
of my other questions, but yeah,
hundreds of times.
I
We
was
do a word
joking, make it a
count, and I'm like,
drinking game,
"Man,
but
that's 150 times you said that word. What are you doing?" Um, and
yeah,
it was a beautiful thing, though, because I realized that as I did my own healing, I was able to change the storytelling. Because the
Yes.
first time it came
Yeah.
through, it was raw.
Mhm.
And so my first time actually putting it to
Yeah.
words, I was deep in the grief,
Mhm.
right? So that became the focal point of what I wrote
Yeah. Yeah, I
about.
think I even have messages where it's like, "I got it down to 47."
Uh-huh. And so, yeah, and so it was really neat to see kind of the parallels in realizing that in that lifetime I healed,
Right.
and I had the capacity to heal again in
In
this
this
one.
one. Mm,
And then the story shifted
right.
as that healing happened. So what
I love
you
that.
have now is a much more
Right.
healed version than that original one.
Yeah, I love that. So there is actually a couple of comments from the chat that I would
Mhm.
pop up. So Diane G was saying there are a lot of parallels or repeating patterns from our experiences during the Lyran Draconian Wars.
Yes. There are. And I think that that's part of why they have been pushing so much for this book to come out
Right.
now, because there are so many parallels in this lifetime to what happened then, there is an opening for people as well to
Mm,
bring back those memories of being in that lifetime, and of it was to have community, to be connected, to hold
right.
the light, to do the different practices and rituals, to hold that space even through really difficult experiences. And the whole process of getting this book out was to help reawaken that for
Right.
people. And, several different people that I've talked to about the book, different readers and people who, uh, channel and all of that,
Mhm.
said, this is an activation. This book is a
Right.
DNA activation. It is to awaken us to who we are, not just here, but who we are in that lifetime,
Right.
so that we can bring that energy forward, so that we can navigate these parallels
Right.
in a way that is meant to move the earth forward. Right? We're talking about that transition between the 3D and the 5D, and we talk about
Right.
that a lot. And the way that we navigate energy is what that's all about. And so that's, a big part of why the book had to come out
When
right
it did.
now.
Yeah. So Living in Radiance asked, do you keep a notepad with you so you can document when you are given information? Like, were they really nice and were like, well, wait till you're, going to go to bed? Or would it just be like willy-nilly, like
Willy-nilly all over the place. I would be driving, the number of voice memos I have taken. Yeah, the worst is in the shower. I'm like, "Dude, you gotta wait. You just gotta wait." I'm not taking notes, writing with soap on the shower wall. Um, yeah. So, yeah, a lot of it was dreams in the beginning. So, keeping a dream journal. And I remember the very first one that came through, and I immediately came and sat down and just started typing
Right.
away. And I called Tanis. Like, "Can you
Yeah.
talk? I need to talk about this dream." And so, yeah, I would do that, and then I would have meditation, and then have, some journal
Mhm.
time to write down what came after. And, it kind of unfolded that way. I'd be out, and then I would just open up my notes, and I would just start taking notes and then email them to myself
Mhm.
so that I would make sure I had them.
Right.
Yeah. So it came, it's funny too, because, I've had people ask me, like, did it come like in a full start to finish kind of
Right.
thing? And it's like, no, it came in a
No.
little bit here and a little
Yeah.
bit there and a little bit over there. And it took a long time to figure out how to even put it together.
Mhm.
And so I needed a lot of guidance from them to go, like, how do you want me to do this?
Right.
And that's why we came out with the history and then the story.
Right.
And, I even had, one person say, like, the history is kind of like your world building. So it's like you
Right.
did your world building up front and then you told
Mhm.
your story.
Right.
And so she was like, you could integrate it into the story. And I was like, I could, but they told me to do it this way. So
Right.
here we go.
And how was it like learning and writing about that galactic history? Like, did you know some of it already before you kind of got the rest of the download, or was it just like a learn as you went kind of?
It was more of a learn as I went. I mean, to the point where they were giving me galactic history, and I'm like, really? That doesn't make any, really? And I'm like, I'm not going to write about that because I was like, no way. And then I would actually have to look it up.
Right.
And I was like, oh, right. Like Mintaka, everybody talks about Mintaka and it's just a star and it's, and I remember getting my first kind of download of the history around what had happened there. And when they told me that it was actually a cluster of stars and that it was operating in a very specific way, and how and like Mintaka was actually attacked before any of the Lyra planets were, but they hadn't perfected
Yes.
their their equipment yet.
Yeah.
And so instead of destroying it, they just broke it. And I'm talking they as in the Draconians.
Yes.
And so it split. And I was like, really? Really? So I looked it up, and sure enough, it is a grouping. It's not a single star. And I'm like,
That's amazing.
Right? Or they told me, what was another big one?
Arcturus Stream, I think, was one that you
Arcturus
mentioned.
Stream was another really big one because what they did is they told me that the Arcturus Stream was actually pulled into our galaxy, pulled into the Milky Way around the same time, well, shortly after the reptilians, the dragons, the reptilians put the Draconians, those that became the Draconians, into our galaxy. And so, and because they were a penal colony, they got kind of words, Jen. They were exiled into the Milky Way. And so what happened is that energy came in, and because the universe wants that balance, the Arcturians had actually agreed to allow the Arcturus Stream to be pulled in as a counterbalance to that draconian energy. And they're giving me all of this information, and I'm like, are you kidding? And they're like, yeah, it doesn't follow any of the flow of the Milky Way. It goes counter to it. It does its own flow. It's not a part of it. And I'm like, if I write all this stuff, people, it's not like, I get it. And I don't think that always science has to match or anything, but I do think that it is important to be like true to, so I was like, okay. And I wrote it all down. And then I was like, well, actually I didn't at first. So I had just wrote Arcturus Stream in the book. Talking about in the diaspora, talking about how some of us ended up there, and that was it. That was the only thing I mentioned about it. And it was actually Dr. Lisa Thompson, Uluru, who came to me and said, "Did you mean to call this Arcturus Stream?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I wrote a quick email saying, "Yeah, it was pulled in, blah, blah, blah," like just saying a bit of the history.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Oh, I guess I should probably put that in the book, huh?" So then I wrote out that whole section, but there was a part of me that was like, okay, there's a reason I didn't put it in, because I was like,
just out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, what if it, and then people are going to be like, oh, this is just, nonsense because, and so again, I looked it up, and I was like, sure enough, the Arcturus Stream got pulled into the Milky Way millions and millions of years ago, whatever it was. And it does not follow the same pattern that every other star in the Milky Way follows. It does its own thing. And I went, I don't know why I keep questioning you guys.
Love when I do that though.
Yeah, but it was amazing because the validation that came when I was able to look it up and go, oh, that actually is like what's going on. And yeah, sure. Like I follow constellations and I love to look at the stars, and I always know where Lyra is and the Pleiades, and like I'm from, like I have that connection, but I've never deep dove into like the science part of it. And so, they're telling me all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. Draco having a dwarf constellation. And they had told me, like, that's through the dwarf constellation, that was a portal, and this is how
Mhm.
the reptilians had pushed the draconians through, and it became like a looking glass and all
Mhm.
this stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's a mini constellation inside of or a mini galaxy inside of a galaxy. Like, this is just silliness. And then sure enough, Draco has it. And I'm like, okay, it's there. It's actually there.
Well, Diane was just saying that makes sense. There are other star races that were pulled into Milky Way too. I wonder if they were pulled in at the same time as the Arcturus stream.
Yeah. It's very possible, because there was a huge, um, you know, balancing that needed to happen
Hmm.
at that moment, and when that happened. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was more. I mean, I know that they've given me so much information, and I know that it's like minuscule
Yeah, just
in terms of the
touching the surface of it.
full,
Yeah,
right? And I feel not overwhelmed, but like in awe almost of the amount of information
right,
that had been given to me through this. And so still knowing that that's like a pin drop
right.
in what's actually out there is just mind blowing.
Mhm. And Diane asked another question here. She said, "What was the biggest challenge you encountered when getting the book out? Was it just time, or?"
um yeah, I think the biggest challenge in getting it out, well, I guess it depends on what part of the process
Right,
you're talking about. So, at different parts along the way, certain aspects of the editing and stuff like that, I had, different people do different things, and there were
right,
challenges that arose there. And then once that was kind of done, well, early on, one of them was, splitting things up and then kind of deciding,
right.
like, how do I want to do that? What does that look like? Does that really resonate? Feeling into it. So there's a lot of the logistical kind of pieces of it, I think, were a lot harder than the actual writing of it.
Hmm.
That's for me. For those helping me edit, I can only imagine that the information coming in sporadically and all over the place and going, hey, read this now because it's completely different than it was before, because I got all this new information and I had to rewrite this section to
Yeah.
explain this or that. I'm sure that was probably challenging at times.
I will say it was more challenging being like, I am cutting apart her baby and rearranging it, and I hope she doesn't unfriend me. Like, that was the first
Oh,
thought.
golly, not at all. Not at all. Well, and we joked about that too, because for me, it's memory. And
Right.
so like we all do with memory, it's a little
Mhm.
bit jumbled. We got a little bit here and a
Right,
little bit there, and then we might remember something else from over here, and then
right,
and then we're putting it all in, and it's hard because it makes sense in my mind.
right, 'cause you see it.
But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that it makes sense for anybody else.
Right.
And so I've really found, and I know you were like, oh, don't hate me for this, but I really appreciated the ability to say, hey, if you put this here and then you put that there instead of the other way around, it's going to flow better and people are going to have a better understanding of what you're talking about. So I absolutely appreciated that.
Trust me, that she was like co-editor, because it'd be sometimes it'd be like, "Mom, I'm editing this. Does this sound right?" Like, she was like co-editor.
Hmm. Well, and it was, yeah. And I think that was, at times it was frustrating in the sense that part of me was like, I just want to get this
Yeah.
done. And then they'd give me more information and I'd
Right.
be like, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't feel like writing about that. And then you would be like,
They didn't
hey,
give you a
Jen, can you
choice.
tell me a little bit more about this? I'm like, oh, fine, I'll write that too. And
They were
so,
channeling for me too, apparently.
well, that's it. If I don't listen, they're like, okay, we're just going to tell everybody else to tell you so that you do it anyway. But yeah, as far as getting the book out, I think this one went probably pretty smooth in the big picture of
Yeah.
things. Um, yeah, it was more just that kind of like hiccup that happened
Mhm.
with KDP, and they were like, "Well, I don't know. We're gonna have to bump
And
it
it
up
worked
to the higher
itself
ups.
out
It'll take a
anyway.
couple days.
Yeah.
It'll be," and I'm like, "All right."
Hey, and you had number 1 left, right, and center, so it as you said, it all worked out, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, I think we have time for probably one or 2 more questions here. So is there a particular scene or passage you're incredibly proud of writing? Like, was there one that was just like stands out as like a section that you're like really proud of? Or I'm thinking of a specific chapter that you weren't sure about whether you were going to include or not.
I don't know if I'd say I'm very proud of it, one way or the other. I know what section you're talking
Yes.
about.
It doesn't have to be that one. Is there like, I don't know, the
Well,
part where you're writing
even
about leaving Lyra, like I know that like there's a lot of emotion in that section
yeah,
or
I mean, I guess I would have to say, um, yeah, in the beginning piece, well, one, the very first chapter where I talk about us coming into form,
Mhm.
that was really powerful for me to be able to have come through. And actually, I had started to write about it, and then I did a QHHT session,
Mm,
and I actually was able to live that experience again and see
interesting.
it. And I felt that piece of coming, into that energy, coming down, kind of as the energy, looking around, deciding how to take form, what that was going to be.
Right.
That was an incredible experience that I really still don't have words for.
Mhm.
So being able to have that come through and being able to write that in the very beginning, the first chapter, was really powerful for me. The other one that I still where I talked about evacuating the planet,
Right.
and I talked about being pulled onto the ship, and that whole part of the book, I yeah, my whole body is just vibrating. I think more being able to put it into writing, being able
Right.
to express it, being able to process it enough to be able to do that
Mhm.
was an incredible experience for me. And as I go through, like, I'm just kind of thinking about all of the different things that we talked about or that came through. Yeah, to to the chapter that you're talking about. She's talking about chapter 25, guys. um,
There was some going back and forth about that chapter.
well, and this is it. And I was on the fence about do I or do I not put in a more intimate scene
Yes.
into the book. And originally I was like, no, 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 no. But I got to a place too where I realized that the sacredness
Mhm.
of intimacy is often not portrayed in
Right.
writing. And because things there were so much energetically based, that
Right.
any kind of connection was energetic first and foremost. And what came through was, yeah, you know what? I think that it would be really powerful to be able to give that message
Right.
again, to talk to the sacredness of our sexuality and to talk about how we can have that kind of a connection with somebody, and it's not strictly the physical. The
Right.
physical is an
Yeah.
aspect of it, but it's not the entirety of that connection.
Mhm.
And I hope that that came
Oh,
through
definitely.
in the book.
And I mean, for me, like, even where, as you said, like, there's discussion about, like, do we, don't we, do we, don't we, with the chapter. And for me, I think the biggest piece of it wasn't even like the focus on that. It was after all the grief and everything and all that hardship that she went through, you went through, that there was that little win, that you feel like there's just that little, like, yeah, like there's finally something, like all this heaviness and finally something, something good happened, if you want to, there's no good and bad, but so finally something,
Right.
Went right for once.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting too, because even to that, right? Like we did some of the ceremonies, and it was the four of us. So Teriel and Kaylin and Ryan and myself. And so we had these beautiful ceremonies, and those energies, I think, still follow us. And so we had that deep connection and this beautiful energetic connection through the Taurus and everything that happened. So again, you guys can read it to see it. But what, when you talk about that win, that really was it, right? And so, in this, it's interesting because in this lifetime, we have all of this kind of, like way of thinking about things that was so very different then. And so, yes, that connection with Ryan, of course, was absolutely incredible. But there's also these other connections that were fully immersive. And I think that I hope that comes through in there, that all of those things were that kind of light at the end of the of the tunnel. Right. But this was, one piece of it that you could see, even, the longing and all that's there, and that, wanting to have, a more connection, but also, we sometimes even still hold ourselves back, and we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And so that scene also speaks to that, to our willingness to let our guard down and put ourselves out there and say, hey, like, can you meet me where I'm at? And
I love that.
So
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for coming on and answering all of our questions. I'm going to ask you one more favor. Can you give us the pronunciation of your name in the book?
Yes, I am Kailira, sometimes called Kai, and my last name is Celestara.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around with us and hanging out with Jen and I as we talked about her book. And as she said, if you guys have any questions, if you read the book after this, watching this live, and you end up having questions, email me, post them in the comments, and I'll get them to Jen, or get Jen to pop on over and answer any questions you guys might have. And with that, I will see you guys in a couple of weeks for our next show. Have a great rest of your day, night, wherever you are in the world, and have a great week. And we'll see you real soon. Bye.